Let me start by addressing, for many of you who do not know, what the NSIA, or the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, is about. The NSIA was set up in 2012 following the passage of an act in 2011 called the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority Establishment Act. This was set up as a sovereign wealth fund to manage excess revenue from crude oil and hydrocarbon sales. As you very well know, this is similar to what many other countries in the world have implemented as a way to create a savings base for future generations of their country people, as well as provide stabilization support for the economy. So the NSIA was set up along those lines. And the question I keep getting asked is, how is this different from the excess crude account? The difference is very simple. The excess crude account was an administrative arrangement without any real backing law. And the NSIA has a law with a clear investment mandate to invest in 3 areas: stabilization, future generations fund, as well as the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund, which does domestic infrastructure investments. So contrary to certain beliefs out there, the NSIA is not a bank. The NSIA is an investment agency of the Federation of Nigeria, set up to invest excess revenues from crude oil sales above what is required for the budget. At the moment, it runs side by side with the excess crude account, and the idea at the inception of the NSIA was that over time, the NSIA and the excess crude account will merge. And the truth is very simple. The NSIA needs to prove itself and create a little bit of credibility before we can have such a merger. The other thing I want to say about the NSIA is when it started with $1 billion in 2012. And subsequent to that, the current administration have, over the last 2 years, added $250 million last year and $250 million this year, bringing it to government contribution of $1.5 billion. On top of all that, the NSIA also manages money on behalf of other agencies of government. $350 million on behalf of the MBET, $100 million on behalf of the Debt Management Office, as well as just over $35 million on behalf of the federal government, actually. And then, of course, the last 4 years of the NSIA's operation, it has been quite profitable, and added up onto all of that gives us over $2 billion under management. How does the NSIA operate? So I mentioned these 3 funds. The Nigeria Infrastructure Fund is set up to enhance infrastructure in Nigeria. We have 6 areas of focus. We have areas of focus in agriculture, in healthcare, in toll roads, in power, in industrial real estate, as well as mid to downstream oil and gas. These are the areas of immediate focus. There are other areas, of course, that we're looking at, and I'll probably go into more details on what some of these areas entail. The second fund we have is the Future Generations Fund. Now, this is a diversified pool of assets invested largely internationally and some locally to create revenue base and profit base for the future generations of Nigerians. And here we invest in everything from the public equity markets to the private equity markets to what are described as hedge funds and to other types of asset classes that we believe will earn a consistent diversified returns for Nigerians. But this is largely invested internationally. Then there's finally the Stabilization Fund. This is almost like a cash account for the government. By the law, that account is available to be drawn down when it's needed for stabilization. The ratio of our funds is split 40% into the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund, 20% into the Stabilization Fund, and 40% into the Future Generations Fund. That is how we're set up. Of course, I've been asked, why do we have so many mandates? Because if you compare us to other sovereign wealth funds, they tend to have only 2 mandates: stabilization and future generations. The reality is this: Nigeria is a developing country, and we must use our fund to attract other co-investments to enhance our infrastructure. Hence, the template to add a 3rd fund focused on domestic infrastructure investments. If you compare the NSIA to our international peers, many of them do not invest domestically, but that's because most of those countries are already well developed. We are not. So the idea is that the NSIA will provide a platform for other people to also invest with the NSIA into Nigeria. And believe me, this has become a template for most developing countries, particularly African countries who are setting up sovereign wealth funds. Many of them are coming to copy the NSIA template, and some have actually gone as far as codifying our practices in their own laws. So this is something that I think is complicated, yes, but it's actually the right way for developing countries to set up their own sovereign wealth funds. The other question I keep getting asked is, how have these mandates driven NSIA strategy in relation to investments in infrastructure? Very simple. If you look at agriculture, for example, we are focused on agriculture, and it's at the moment the single biggest area of commitment for us. We participated and drove the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative, which resulted in over 6 million bags of fertilizer produced, blended locally, and delivered to farmers at 30 to 40% below market price without the use of subsidy. Along the line, we revived and enhanced more than 11 blending plants, which we expect to bring up to 20 by the end of by the next planting season. This, in my opinion, will enhance the growth of agriculture, which is the biggest GDP contributor to Nigeria and therefore deserves our investments. We have also gone ahead to use this to create co-investment platforms. In co-investment platforms, we have created one for agriculture as well, along with a company called UFF in South Africa. They are a specialist agriculture fund, and they've invested alongside the NSIA, and we're raising money from other people to create a pool of funds targeted at $200 million for investments in agriculture in Nigeria. To catalyze that much money, the NSIA only has to commit $25 million. And we're very proud of the work being done by our partners and ourselves in terms of the investments being made in agriculture. It's been a very interesting success story for the NSIA. In healthcare, we've also set up a similar scheme. We're looking at doing quite a number of things in healthcare, and work has commenced on 1 or 2 cancer centers that we want to invest in Lagos and in Abuja. And we also have diagnostic centers as well as commitments to invest in tertiary hospitals across the country starting next year. To talk about the pillars of our investments, there are quite a few areas I'd like to talk about, because the choices we've made as to where we invest and what we invest in are not random. There is an investment principle around them. There's an investment policy statement that's published on our website. And the things that guide how we invest in infrastructure are the following. Number 1, the area of investment has to be of national importance. Number 2, it has to be an area where we can earn both commercial and social returns that are attractive. And number 3, we must be able to attract both domestic and international investors, or at least one of the two, into these areas, because private sector participation brings a lot of discipline. Those are important for us. So the sectors we have chosen: agriculture of national importance, healthcare of national importance, toll roads of national importance, all of these things are guided by this principle. The other areas of how we drive our business in infrastructure investing is actually in bringing co-investments. We expect that for every $1 or #1 the NSI invests in infrastructure, we're able to mobilize at least 4 times that from external parties. And the final thing we also do, and that's the final pillar of our investment principles, is actually creating financial institutions that are essential in driving infrastructure investments in Nigeria. To that extent, the NSI is the single largest shareholder in the Nigeria Mortgage Refinancing Company, whose role is to provide mortgage refinancing for people to own homes. The NSI created InfraCredit along with Garantco in the UK to provide credit enhancement for infrastructure bonds. The NSI also is the second largest shareholder in the Development Bank of Nigeria, holding shares on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. We have committed to investing in the Nigeria Commodities Exchange, which is something that will help drive agriculture investing in Nigeria. So there is this pillar of our investments, which are actually more financial products and financial institutions, but those institutions are essential to ensure that we have a solid, stable infrastructure investment environment going forward. We have also been able to attract co-investments. $200 million I mentioned earlier for agriculture. I never mentioned the platform we set up for real estate, industrial real estate. So things like special economic zones, industrial parks, areas that we're interested in real estate. And here we partnered with Old Mutual of South Africa, and the target for that fund size is $500 million. We're also looking at creating a middle market industrialization fund. If we do not industrialize as a country, our economy will never be stable. And we believe that we're going to play a role in helping industrialization by creating this fund focused at industrializing companies in Nigeria. And I'll give you an example. If you look at housing, We have the statistics being quoted, and I haven't been able to verify it, is we have 16 million units of housing deficits. Now that's interesting. But if you look at the typical Nigeria house, it has many things that are imported. How much glass do we produce? How many roofing sheets do we produce? How many dimension stones do we produce? Sanitary ware, how many of those things do we produce locally? These are opportunities for industrialization, and we intend to tackle it. So we believe that beyond that, if you look at the oil and gas sector, there are many products in between the chain that are still not yet produced locally. So we will be looking at some of these things as areas of investment for the NSIA, because industrialization is important for Nigeria. We have a very strong risk control team. We have a governance structure that involves the board in 3 out of 4 stages of investing. Initial origination is done by management, but before we go even any one step further to review or to invest in due diligence, the board has to approve. We come back to the board to approve for us to develop the project. We come back for the board to approve for us to go ahead and invest. This is, in our opinion, one of the reasons why governance at the NSI is very strong. We're also very transparent. The Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute has consistently over the last 3 years ranked us in the top quartile for transparency and governance. These are things that we're very, very mindful of and very careful about as a way to minimize and avoid losses. We're an investment company. Losses may be inevitable, but what we can do is to try and minimize and avoid them. I think that in terms of changes, the funding structure has to be more consistent. Now I'm aware, of course, that we have budget deficits and consequently funding may be a bit challenging, but we must ensure that the organization subsequent continues to get funded in the manner as it is described in the law setting it up. I believe that the strategy of the NSIA should expand into helping the government in asset management. There are many assets of the government that are strewn all over the place that are not properly managed. Other sovereign wealth funds in the world have been set up by transferring those assets into their sovereign wealth funds for management, be it real estate, be it industrial assets that have not been privatized but can be enhanced through active asset management. Those can come into the NSIA, in my opinion. And this is how the government can help the NSIA grow, and the NSIA can help the government derive value from its assets. So this is the conclusion of my remarks, and I hope that you have learned a little bit about the NSIA, and I'm hoping that we'll continue to stay in touch with you. I, Uche Orji, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, hereby use this medium to reiterate that the NSIA supports the current administration's agenda and economic transformation initiatives targeted at developing Nigeria.